The Headless Century. A wealthy businessman who worked behind the political scenes both in Georgetown and Charleston owned a large plantation just outside of Charleston. He often entertained businesses and political associates at the manor house, influential men who came from other colonies and abroad. When war broke out between America and England, the owner was reluctant to take sides, for his business was primarily supported by England. Not so his family, who were actively engaged in the revolution. The plantation owner did not stay on the fence for long, though. When the British occupied Georgetown and made it a stronghold and supply base for their military operations, he declared himself a Tory, much to the wrath of his family, who labeled him a traitor. His daughter in particular was enraged by his stance, for she was strictly loyal to the colonies. Still, she kept a low profile since she was living in her father's house and became a spy for General Francis Morrison. It was due to the girl's alertness and the information that she gathered and furnished for the Swamp Fox that so many of the general's exploits met with success. The family owned a house in Georgetown that adjoined the cemetery of Prince George's Church, and it was in a vault in that cemetery that the girl's spy left messages. And one of those messages contained vital information about a prisoner of war who was being held at the plantation. The prisoner was an old fellow, father to one of the trusted men in Marin's brigade, who had been present when many of the plans and strategies for some of the local operations had been formulated. Due to his age and infirmity, the Swamp Fox was afraid the old man might unknowingly furnish the enemy with damaging information in a moment of confusion. It was vitally important that he be rescued and taken beyond the reach of his captors. The girl's spy had arranged to visit the plantation to obtain supplies for her townhouse, though her real aim was to locate the old man. She found him lodged in the plantation house along with several wounded soldiers. In order to give Marin and his men time to retrieve the prisoner, the girl had the soldiers guarding the plantation invited to a reception at a neighboring estate. There was only one sentry left on guard that evening that the Swamp Fox and his men came thundering down the avenue of the plantation. This sentry, thinking they were British soldiers arriving from town, ran down the steps to greet them. The Americans were almost upon him when the sentry recognized Marin's men. He fired his pistol at the nearest horseman, who was already aiming at him. Both shots missed, but a saber-wielding cavalryman promptly cut off the sentry's head, leaving his body to stagger around spouting blood like a decapitated chicken before it fell, twitching to the ground amidst a growing pool of gore. The prisoners were retrieved and taken back to Marin's camp along with the wounded British and Tory soldiers housed at the plantain, who were held as prisoners of war. As for the Headless Century, he was buried in the garden near the old plantation house. Ever since the death of the sentry, folks wandering the plantation grounds at dusk have sometimes heard the thunder of phantom hooves coming up along the avenue. Moments later, a headless man dressed in the clothes of a British dragoon appears near the house, the ragged stump of his neck spouting blood. The headless sentry waves his pistol aimlessly as if trying to warn off trespassers, and then drags himself away as if searching for its head. Anyone encountering this headless sentry in this manner would flee in terror, and soon word of the phantom was all over Charleston. As for the plantation workers, they started wearing crosses and other amulets to protect themselves from whatever they thought walked the grounds after dark. Unfortunately, this did nothing. to inhibit the specter, who still searches for his head to this day. The Third Eye Man. Steam tunnels under the University of South Carolina are said to be home to a spooky character with 3 eyes. The Three-Eyed Man has received less publicity than other South Carolina phantoms, but he has been making appearances around the university for more than 50 years. Christopher Nicholas documented the first Third Eye Man sighting in 1949 while a student at USC. He and his friends claimed to have seen a strange man in silver enter a sewer portal at the night of November 12th in front of Longstreet Theater. Nicholas spread this story of the sewer man in an article for The Gamecock. In April of 1950, university police officers allegedly encountered the Third Eye Man while patrolling near Longstreet Theater. It's rumored the officer discovered the man, this time described as gray and grotesque, huddled over mutilated chicken parts. When the officer shined his flashlight on the man's face, he noted a distinct third eye in the middle of his forehead. By the time other officers arrived on scene, the man had disappeared into the system of tunnels just below the school. The Blue Lady. In the woods of Leamington, when the island was once an untamable frontier, once sat a lighthouse. This lighthouse, so the story goes, was watched by a man named Adam Fripp. The hurricane of 1898 was said to be one of the worst the island had ever seen. Massive storm swells buried the sand dunes and washed the roots of pines under gallons of seawater as the Leviathan surged forward. Adam Fripp knew that no matter what manner of death awaited him in the inky depths that approached, his job was to keep the light burning. With driving rain pelting his face, he wandered through the water chest deep, swirling with undertows ready to deliver him to the depths, and delivering on its waves an entire forest full of nightmare creatures wrenched from their homes and biting mad. But still, his job was to keep the light burning. He braved the currents and the creatures to the oil house, then dragged the precious fuel out of the depths, and then up the dizzying heights of the lighthouse, winds lashing him as he went. He climbed, bent forward by duty, adrenaline-charged, senses immune to the tingling numbness, creeping up his arms and fingers of tight pain, clenching his chest. He looked down, and through the sheets of rain he could see the storm surge now claiming the base of the lighthouse, painting the rest of the earth a churning black. And still, he climbed. As he reached the top, nervous aflame across his weakening sinew, he only then became aware that something was happening in the dead center of his chest. His breath, willowing in and out of his ribs like the wind itself, soon shallowed and wheezed. He laid down the oil, shut the door to the lantern room, and steadied himself. From in here, preceded by timber and glass, he was protected. He can wait out the storm, elevated from the certain death below, with enough oil to keep the lantern burning, and the poor ships now navigating this hell save. Forcing all of himself on this knowledge, his breathing steadied. A strange calm settled over him. For the briefest of moments, he entered the notion that he might survive the night. Just then, a thought. He was safe because of his position high in the tower. But Caroline, before he can act, before he can even think of what he could have done to save his daughter, a ferocious wind burst through the window beside him, instantly filling the room with savage gusts and flying shards of broken glass. The sound of the pane giving way hit the room like a cannonball. And the last sensation Adam Fripp felt was the gust blowing into his chest, seeming to blow through him, before those icy fingers clenched tight around his chest. And then the darkness claimed him, too. When rescuers arrived days later, they found the light extinguished. Placed on his back, pennies on his eyes, they found the body of Adam Fripp. And at his feet, hunched down in a corner, in the tattered remains of a blue dress, they had found the remains of Caroline Fripp. All around her they found emptied jugs of oil, carried up the tower throughout the night to keep the flame burning. From what they could tell, she must have known somehow that something had gone terribly wrong with her dad. Fighting back her terror, she had braved the same island ocean full of eyes that glowed with menace and waves that curved like beckoning fingers into the depths, to make her way to the lighthouse. The wind tearing the folds of her blue dress, threatening to launch her into the night, she made the climb to the top. She had arrived to find her father, dead from the strain of keeping his duty. She placed pennies on his eyes, currency for the afterlife she only vaguely understood. She had given him a respectable service. Then she spent the night traveling the sinister waters, the deadly climb, and the howling storm up and down the tower, replenishing the oil to keep it lit. She had carried on her father's duty, and then, at some time in the night, she had died. During construction of another famous lighthouse, in a much sunnier, much less untamable area of the island's history, the old lighthouse keeper's cottage was moved into a new resort, aiming to transfer the island into a tourist destination. As the foundation was set and the first framework was erected from the Harbor Town Lighthouse, workers would often notice an odd light coming from the old cottage. Some merely dismissed it as a strange blue blur on the edges of their vision, but some swore that they had seen a sad-looking young woman, dressed in blue, anxiously pacing the porch. In time, as more and more people came to the island, the Blue Lady was seen around the site of the old Leamington Lighthouse, breathlessly making her way through the woods during the storms. The legend of the Blue Lady grew, the sightings rising whenever hurricane clouds rolled through the skies. She's been spotted in Leamington. She's been spotted at her old cottage, still searching desperately for her father. When the cottage became CQ's, employees would notice that the newly installed payphone would ring endlessly, only to issue a dial tone when answered. Possibly Caroline calling for help. Whoever she was, and whether any of the stories are true, the legend of the Blue Lady still waits for those brave souls who dare walk the woods of Hilton Head Island at night. The Gray Man. The Gray Man is an indistinct, shadowy figure who walks the beaches of Cape Hatteras as a hurricane is approaching. He appears as the first winds of the storm touch the island, whenever a hurricane is a threat to the island and its inhabitants. He never speaks, or at least no one ever heard him speak. No one has ever gotten close enough. If anyone approaches the Gray Man, his form slowly fades into the salty air, completely vanishing before the curious onlooker can reach where he was standing. But his presence alone is enough to warn the islanders. If he's seen on a beach, it's a sure way to know that the oncoming storm will be a bad one. He's a warning that nature is still something to be taken seriously. Who is the Gray Man? Some people say he's the ghost of a sailor from the island who died at sea in a hurricane. They say that he comes back to warn his fellow islanders of the danger, because his soul is so terrorized by his windy, watery end that he couldn't bear to go on from this world, while he can still prevent others from sharing the same fate. Some others will tell you that he never was a man, and that he's just a force of nature. That he's not so much a ghost as a spirit, an expression of the force pushing the wind and the waves towards the vulnerable island. Even in today's world, where we can catch the storms from space and fly airplanes into the storm to measure the winds, we still give each hurricane a name when it's born. We may name them because some part of still thinks that anything so powerful and so willing must be alive. Maybe the gray man is just the hurricane itself talking to us. The voice of a living force born out of the deep ocean. Boo hags. Boo hags are a little like vampires, in that they are undead beings that feed off of living humans. They are skinless and bright red in color with bulging blue veins. To survive in the world of the living, they'll have to steal a living person's skin and wear it like clothes, so that they can move amongst the living without suspicion. At night, though, they shed the skin and go looking for a victim to ride. Boo hags are crafty. They can get into your house through very small openings, a slightly open window, or even a crack in the wall. Once inside, they'll sit on a sleeping victim's chest and steal their breath, or more specifically, their energy. A boo hag will ride its victim all night long and sneak away before dawn to return to its skin. If it can't get back into its skin before the sun comes up, it will be destroyed. There are some warning signs to let you know that a boo hag is close. First, the air will become very hot and damp. Second, the air will smell like something is rotten. But if you've woken up exhausted after a full night's rest, you may have been visited by a boo hag. But boo hags are not without a weakness. First, they, like other evil spirits in Gala culture, are repelled by indigo blue. If you go outside and paint the tops of your window frames an indigo blue, boo hags won't be able to get through those windows. Salt, too, is a good boo hag repellent. A salted hag cannot get back into its skin. But it's difficult to salt a hag, especially since we can't just run around pouring salt on people we deem suspicious. The easiest way to avoid a visit with the boo hag is to keep a straw broom or a brush with many bristles close by. Boo hags are apparently curious and compulsive creatures. They can't seem to pass a straw broom without counting every last strand. By the time they finish counting, they typically don't have enough time to get back to their skin before the sun comes up. Some boo hags are able to count fast, though, so you might want to keep a few bristled brushes and strainers around. If you wake up and discover a boo hag on your chest, it's best not to fight one. If you fight, the boo hag just might steal your skin. Have you been exhausted lately? Tonight when you go to bed, be sure to hang a strainer on your bedroom's doorknob and leave a straw broom in the corner of your room. Maybe you should place a salt shaker on your night table, just in case. Hopefully that will be enough for you to have a good night's sleep. Sorry this is so late, ghouls. I have been literally sick as a frickin' dog all weekend. I'm still sick. You could probably hear it in my throat. I recorded this last week, literally a week ago, and I was so excited. I was like, oh, I'm going to get this done so early. It's going to be great. No, kid got sick, ended up at the ER. I got sick. I bet Trevor's going to get sick next. I apologize. It's late. I feel terrible, but it's here. It's long, and I really liked it. So, yeah, let me know in the comments if any of you are sick too, because I heard this, along with the flu, there's all these other viruses going around now, and it's just terrible. So if you're sick, I'm sorry. Have some soup and some tea. Lay down, listen to some creepy stories to feel better. But as always, ghouls, the last video will be on the top left, the next video will be on the bottom left. All my social medias are on the screen, as well as in the description box below. And remember, there's always someone or something watching you.